Let's talk about something that's really changing the game in education. We're seeing a huge shift away from that frantic last-minute cram session for final exam and moving toward a system that actually measures how we learn, how we grow, and what we can create all year long.
Oh, you know that feeling, right? We have all been there. That deep in your gut panic, surrounded by a mountain of textbooks, probably fueled by way too much coffee, just trying to stuff an entire year's worth of curriculum into your brain. It's a universal experience for sure. But is it really the best way to show what you've learned?
The reality is, when we rely only on those big final exams, we run into some pretty serious problems. Think about it. It's like trying to judge an entire movie based on one single random screenshot. It creates this massive wave of stress, and it encourages cramming, not real, deep understanding. Plus, it completely misses out on all those essential skills like creativity, teamwork, and critical thinking. It ends up being a system that measures how well you can take a test, not necessarily how much you've actually learned.
So, what if there was a better way? Well, this brings us to a new kind of blueprint for education, one that's built around something called school level assessment, or SLA for short. Let's dig into what that actually means. Okay, so you might have heard the term school-based assessment, or SBA, floating around. That's kind of the big, general idea on a global scale. School-level assessment, or SLA, is a bit more specific. It's a reform that takes those same principles and builds them into a formal national framework. So you can think of it as taking a really good idea and turning it into an official system. And this is where it gets really smart. SLA isn't about just throwing out exams altogether. Nope, it's about creating a balanced, two-tiered system. So at the school level, you're getting that constant, personalized feedback. But then, at the national level, you still have assessments that make sure there's quality and consistent standards across the whole system. You really get the best of both worlds. Now, for a system like this to actually work and work well, it has to be built on a super strong foundation. And it all rests on 4 absolutely crucial pillars that make sure every single assessment is professional, fair, and, actually useful. So pillar number 1 is validity. And this is pretty straightforward. Are you measuring what you think you're measuring? If you want to know how well a student can speak a language, you actually need to hear them speak it, right? Not just have them write an essay about speaking it. A big red flag here is when a math test is so packed with complicated words that it accidentally becomes more of a reading comprehension test. Next up, we have reliability. This is all about consistency. So if 2 different teachers grade the same assignment, or if you grade it on a Monday versus a Friday, the score should come out pretty much the same. This is exactly why that whole "I know good work when I see it" approach to grading is such a huge red flag. You've got to have clear, objective standards. Our third pillar is equity and fairness. And here's a really interesting point. Fair does not mean identical. It means giving every single student an equal opportunity to show what they know and can do. That might mean offering choices, like you could write an essay or create a presentation. It's all about removing those unnecessary barriers for every kind of learner. And finally, we have practicality. Look, an assessment can sound perfect on paper, but if it requires all these fancy resources that students just don't have, or if it would take a teacher 100 hours to grade for their class, then it's basically useless. The goal is to design assessments that actually work in the real world, for real teachers and real students, not just in theory. Okay, so we've got the principles down, but what does all this actually look like inside a classroom? Let's dive into the practical tools and the different jobs that assessment can do. This table really breaks it down nicely. See, assessment isn't just one thing. First, you've got assessment of learning. That's your classic final exam, the big high-stakes grade. Then there's assessment for learning. Think of that as quick feedback to help you get better along the way. And finally, assessment as learning, which is where you actually learn to track your own progress. A really healthy system uses all 3. So, to make all of this happen, teachers and students need the right set of tools. Let's take a look at 3 of the most powerful ones out there: rubrics, peer assessment, and self-assessment. First up, the rubric. The best way to think about a rubric is like a roadmap to getting an A. It's not a secret. It's this super clear, transparent tool that tells you exactly what's being graded and what good looks like before you even start the assignment. So here's the anatomy of a rubric. It's got 3 main parts. First, you have the criteria. That's what is being judged. Second, the performance levels. That's how well you did it. And third, you have the descriptors. These are the detailed explanations that connect the what
and the how well, so the feedback you get is super specific and totally objective. Next, let's talk about peer assessment. Now, this isn't about having students just grade each other's papers. It's really about students learning from each other. When you evaluate a classmate's work using a clear rubric, you actually deepen your own understanding of what success looks like. It's kind of like learning by teaching. Of course, for this to actually work well, it needs a bit of structure. The teacher has to show what good, constructive feedback looks like. The students should be using a rubric so they're all on the same page, and the teacher keeps an eye on the whole process to make sure the feedback is fair and helpful. It's a guided, really supportive process. And that brings us to our final tool, self-assessment. This is where students learn to turn that critical eye inward. It's the process of looking at your own work and judging it against the standards. This isn't just about giving yourself a grade. It's about developing that absolutely crucial skill of knowing how to improve on your own. And it all works in a simple 3-stage cycle. First, you monitor your work as you're doing it. Then, you judge it against the goal. You figure out the gap between where you are and where you need to be. And finally, you identify the concrete steps you need to take to close that gap. This right here, this is the engine of independent learning.
So when you put all of this together, the principles, the different purposes, the tools, what you get is way more than just a new way of grading. You get a fundamental shift in the entire goal of education itself. This quote just nails it, doesn't it? The goal is no longer about trying to catch students making mistakes. The goal is to understand what they know, figure out where they're struggling, and then give them the tools they need to get better. It's a partnership.
So, ultimately, the big picture is this. We're moving from a single, high-stakes event to a continuous process of growth. We're going from measuring only what's easy to test to valuing the skills that truly matter. And maybe most importantly, we're shifting from a culture of learning just for the test to a culture that fosters curious, independent, lifelong learners. And that leaves us with one final big question to think about. If we can get this right, if we can actually build a system that measures and values the skills that really matter in life, what does the future of education even look like? What can our students and our society become?